Hey friends, how's everyone going? I'm here for my read through the Bible in a year, people, and we're in First Chronicles, and it's interesting. I posted something the other day about this. Probably to me has been I don't know if it maybe has more to do with just other things going on in life too at the moment, but it seems like it's been kind of more challenging of a go. Some aspects of it in particular. And it's interesting how First Chronicles works, but what I want to do is to help us today, just to think about not missing out on too much. And I'm not talking here about trying to mine all of the details in the lists of people and everything. I mean, there is things to be had and found there, but again, as we're reading through the Bible in this kind of big picture setting, we're not really trying to do that so much. But it's hard because First Chronicles starts with kind of so much, listing genealogy type stuff. Um, then we get to sort of the middle in the teens, which is where I want to spend a little bit of just discussion here today, where it's interesting narrative. It reminds us of like the Second Samuel stuff, and a lot of it is very, very, very similar. It would be interesting sometime to take the time to do some comparison work between the narratives in Samuel and Kings versus Chronicles, because again, a lot of it is just like almost verbatim. The same numbers are different, so it's kind of this is, I think, the thing in the Old Testament so far that's been the most kind of reminiscent of like um, the Gospels in the New Testament in that way, about how similar they are, and then oh wow, there's some interesting differences sometimes. So how should we think about that? Things like in Chronicles, if you were to do that like side by side comparison, you'll see other things are really minimized in Chronicles that were there. Other things, there's a lot more information, or sometimes just little details here and there that's sort of different. But there's a lot of rich and interesting things in this middle of First Chronicles, um, and questions that I have and things that I'm thinking about that I haven't really processed before. I'll maybe just share one or two of those things here today. Um, Afterward, it gets kind of back to that, like from chapter 23 again on, it gets back to that. I mean, man, that's a big list of just names, right? Um, of people there. So it's tough, and it can be tough going. And it keeps going that way for a while, and then at the end of First Chronicles, which may be tomorrow, in the reading, it's sort of more engaging narrative again, in the sense it's going to move us forward. At the Second Chronicles, which is a lot more like Kings, right? And so look forward to Second Chronicles in that way. I mean, it still is a lot of similar to the books of Kings, but no, as far as I can tell right now, no long lists of names. So that's probably good for us to kind of process. So you can we're more reading through the Bible in the year than we're necessarily committed to reading the particular chapters every day. So if you're in one of those sections, and this may be advice coming too late at this point, but if you've either dropped off this week or last week and this week because of just the lack of engagement or whatever, it's fine to just actually take some time and push through and take one day and maybe read 3 days worth. Or like yesterday morning, I pulled up my YouVersion Bible app, and I listened to. I spent like an hour plus, and I just listened to almost all of maybe I forget exactly how much time it was, but I just sat there and listened to pretty much all of First Chronicles. So you don't get as much detail when you kind of sit down looking at it, but you get something. So it's still substantial enough. So First Chronicles, I think again it starts getting pretty interesting from 10 and 11. 10 is Saul taking his own life. but there 11 is David becoming king, some of the things that happened. And this is really interesting too, and just because there's just an important time in this period of history that it's good to kind of retrack with some of it. So I would try to keep this still shorter here today. I mostly wanted to just kind of re-engage and let you know I'm still here. I'm not fading away, but I am kind of learning to navigate, my life and my schedule, not necessarily do these videos all the time just because. Now, maybe the upside to that is that if you're getting burnt out on my 5 days a week, half-hour videos, if you're like, that's a lot, maybe you can come back around and re-engage just if I can keep it a little bit shorter with some of that. So I'm not trying to fill in a period of time just to fill it in. Just kind of trying to help us to kind of move forward in this journey here together. So chapter 11, really some interesting stuff here. The comments about the promises about David. So like 11, the Lord God, people said, the Lord God said to you, you will shepherd my people Israel, and you will become their ruler. So David conquers Jerusalem. Again, we already learned this information, but it's a little bit repetitive, a little bit different in details. But especially I want to encourage you that if you're seeing repetition of things, but it's not something that you know that well, either before or even now, don't just say, oh, I already read this, but ask the question, am I familiar with the story? Not the details necessarily, that's fine too. But again, the sort of the big picture stuff. So, excuse me. Okay, David comes. He conquers Jerusalem. This is interesting. In chapter 11, verse 4, David and all of the Israelites marched to Jerusalem, and it says in parentheses, that is Jebus. So there's different names based on different people groups and that kind of thing that can be given to a particular place. Salem is also a place name. So Jeru, Jebus, Salem, that stuff kind of goes in the mix to become Jerusalem ultimately. So anyway, the people that were living there before, the Jebusites, now they're not Israelites. They're worship other gods kind of thing. There are some of the people that, remember, we looked at, I think, like in Joshua, they kind of had some strength and they didn't get rid of them. So David, they all come up and they say to David, you will not get in here. Here's a quote, you will not get in here. Nevertheless, David captured the fortress of Zion, which is the city of David. Understanding the different parts of the city of Jerusalem is really an interesting thing. If you visit with me next June, I'll explain a lot more to you about it, but you can obviously find things about that, but I'm not going to sort of get into that. So he captures it, mighty warriors. So here's an interesting thing. In chapter 13, they're bringing the ark back. Now, we had a whole extended thing. We already read about the ark sort of coming back, but we have that kind of again because it's a really important thing. Interesting note in chapter 14, David's family. Remember before we saw only his sons listed most of the time? This lists sons and daughters, a lot of daughters. So that's really fascinating, I think interesting stuff. In chapter 15, David, after David had constructed building for himself in the city of David, now it wasn't called the city of David before, but as this is written, that's now what they know it as, right? Which is a part of Jerusalem, which is interesting because it's actually the part of Jerusalem that's not the old city. I'm so tempted to talk about this, but you guys probably aren't that interested. So check this out. In chapter 15, or at the beginning, the city of David, he pitched a place for the ark of God and prepared a place and pitched a tent for it. So I'm reading this first, and I'm thinking, is this the tabernacle? Like the ark already has a tent. It's a tabernacle, right? We read Leviticus and Exodus and Leviticus. Hopefully these things are still in our minds. So what did you say? It pitched a tent. Is a tent or the tent? Well, it is actually, as we read on, we find out it is a tent. It's not the tent of the tabernacle. So this is interesting in this time period that, remember, we have Exodus, Leviticus, like we know, like the tabernacle, the Holy of Holies, the most holy place, right, the inner place, that's where the ark's supposed to be. And yet during this time period, right now it's not. And I'll get there in a minute, the tabernacle is somewhere else. The ark has been in a couple different places, and now it's coming to Jerusalem, but the tabernacle isn't there. Ultimately, the temple will be there, which will replace the tabernacle, right? But it's kind of a little bit more confusing than maybe one would think it would be. So yeah, again, a lot more in here, and hopefully, if you haven't read this, you spent a little bit of time in these chapters, kind of reading through it. The chapter 16 also, most of it has this great thing that starts in verse 7. So this, if you want some like soul stuff, if you're like, oh, all this narrative and stuff, I want something for my soul, check out chapter 16, right in the middle of First Chronicles, verse 7. That day when the ark's kind of placed there, and it says, that day David first appointed Asaph and his associates to give praise to the Lord in this manner. So it reads like a psalm or a prayer kind of thing, and it's wonderful, right? So if you need First Chronicles to be redeemed for you, come to chapter 16. Give praise to the Lord, proclaim his name, make known among the nations what he has done, sing to him and praise him. Tell of his wonderful acts, glory to his holy name. Let the hearts of those who seek the Lord rejoice. Look to the Lord in his strength. Seek his face always. Remember the wonders that he has done. Right? And it goes on. He remembers his covenant forever, the promise he made for 1,000 generations. Beautiful, 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 beautiful stuff. Yeah, it doesn't even have, like, sometimes like in the Psalms we'll see like it's like beautiful, then it's like gets kind of more challenging in some ways. This is wonderful. So spend some time and enjoy it. Then towards the end of chapter 16, here's where we learn about what's going on with the tabernacle. Okay, verse 16, verse 39. David left Zadok the priest and his fellow priests before the tabernacle of the Lord at the high place of Gibeon. Okay, so the tabernacle is still somewhere else, and the ark isn't in it. To present burnt offerings to the Lord on the altar of burnt offering regularly, morning and evening, in accordance with everything that is written in the book of the law of the Lord. So this is interesting. We have a time where the tabernacle's there, the altar's there, the offerings are happening there, where it's at in Gibeon, but the ark isn't there. The ark has been a couple places, and now it's in Jerusalem, which is interesting in a lot of ways, and it raises a lot of questions for me, but it also is making me think of looking forward to, because at the end of 2 Kings, and now we're going to kind of go back through that, because we're kind of re-going through here in the Chronicles narratives. Remember, the Babylonians come in, the temple is destroyed, and the ark we don't hear about anymore. So like similarly, it's gone. So like when they come back and rebuild the temple, or the temple as it is in Jesus' day has no Ark of the Covenant in it. Okay, the Holy of Holies is empty, which is really an interesting kind of factor to sort of think about in the midst of this. Of course, a lot of time and mental energy and speculation and whatever has been spent trying to can we find the Ark of the Covenant? And that's right, Indiana Jones. There's a movie about that, sort of, etc. So anyway, I thought that was kind of an interesting point. Chapter 17 is a very, very important moment. I highlighted it in 2 Samuel 7. So you notice there's a lot of things I don't know where they're at. Specifically, I know they're in the right book, but I don't know the place. 2 Samuel 7, I know what's in 2 Samuel 7. It's the same basic thing that's in First Chronicles 17. It's God's promise to David, right? David wants to build a house for God, a temple, the temple. But God says, nope, you're not going to do that. Your son's going to do that, but I'm going to build you a house, not a temple, but a dynasty, a line, and makes this promise, right? This is the Davidic covenant. Very, very essentially important to understanding the biblical story. So God says in verse 10, I declare to you that the Lord will build a house for you. When you're, again, this language is pretty much verbatim. I didn't line them up, but with 2 Samuel 7. When your days are over and you go with your ancestors, I will raise up for your offspring to succeed you, one of your own sons, and I will establish his kingdom. He is the one that will build a house for me, and I will establish his throne forever. I will set him over my house and my kingdom forever. So then David has, if you want something else kind of for the soul, David has a prayer at the end of chapter 17, which is also cool. It's humble. It's, just spend some time with it. It's lovely. So yeah, let me kind of leave it there. If anything else, hopefully you've read this, but if you haven't, even if you've not done anything or checked out, spend some time just kind of, looking through, flipping a couple pages here in First Chronicles. If you haven't, or if you've checked out or whatever, I think you'll be glad that you did. For a couple of reasons about the importance of this moment in the historical kind of timeline of redemptive history, but also for these couple of prayers and psalm worship things. They're really good. So you're missing out if you choose to kind of check out. But at chapter 22 will be the last thing that I mentioned here today. It's about David's kind of preparations for Solomon when he comes, onto the throne, to be able to have some things ready to begin to build this temple, right, for this kind of central place of worship. It's also interesting to hear, like the king, like David, but Solomon will be called God's son in some sense. Like I talked a lot about, Messiah didn't originate with the idea of Jesus. It originated here in the Old Testament with a little bit with priests, but with the kings, anointed ones, meaning Messiah. But also look specifically. So when God says to David, your descendant will be my son and I'll be his father, right, that finds its ultimate fullest fulfillment in Jesus, who we know is more than, in dramatic ways, than any of these humans that have come before, even though of course Jesus is way before. He's the divine son, but nobody knows that at this point in in the narrative. But he says here, he is the one, verse 10, he is the one who will build a house for my name. He will be my son. Of course, that ought not to be too hard for us, because also we are, sons of God, sons and daughters of God, as well, in different ways. So we'll continue to wrap these words used in different ways and concepts together, of course, as we go through with the biblical narrative. So if you want, check in the comments. Let me know where you're at. You're still hanging in, you're struggling, you're good, you're loving it, I don't know, I'm about to give up. Let me know where you're at if you'd like, and we'll see you again soon. Bye.